Welcome to the realm of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Enjoy listening. Curtis Mangold sat on the cold, metallic floor of the Nostra colony's prisoner barracks, his wrists weighed down by heavy chains. His body ached from days, perhaps weeks, of endless labor. The colony, orbiting an unremarkable, distant star, was one of the galaxy's most notorious sites for forced labor. Run by the ruthless Technophage Consortium, escape was considered impossible. The prisoners worked until they were broken, their lives extinguished in the shadow of the colony's endless hunger for resources. Curtis leaned back against the damp wall, his breath shallow, as the sound of approaching guards echoed through the dim corridors. Every clank of their mechanical boots sent a chill down his spine. He'd tried to escape before, many had, but every attempt ended in brutal punishment. As the prisoners were lined up for yet another grueling shift in the mines, a distant explosion shattered the oppressive silence. The ground shook violently, sending prisoners and guards alike stumbling. Curtis looked toward the source of the commotion and saw something he hadn't expected. Massive robotic figures emerging from the shadows of the colony's central chamber. These robots didn't resemble the crude industrial machines used by the technophage. Their designs were sleek, deadly, and unlike anything Curtis had ever seen. Before anyone could process what was happening, a second explosion ripped through the facility. The colony's alarms blared, and guards scrambled to defend their positions. Curtis was frozen in place, his mind racing. Who was attacking? Why now? And more importantly, could this be his chance? Then he saw her. Stepping through the thick smoke was a figure he recognized instantly, though he hadn't seen her in years. Nara! Her shimmering purple skin glowed faintly in the dim light, and her piercing eyes locked onto Curtis as if she'd been searching for him all along. She was clad in armor that melded technology and elegance, her presence commanding. "Curtis Mangold," she said, her voice clear and firm despite the chaos around her. "Do you remember me?" Curtis blinked, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "Nara, is that really you?" "It's me," she said, a small smile touching her lips. "And I'm here to get you out of this hell." Nara's robotic allies moved with precision, systematically dismantling the colony's defenses. Their energy weapons and advanced shielding rendered the guards' attacks futile. Nara herself leaped into action, wielding an energy blade that hummed with power. She moved like a dancer, every strike calculated and devastating. Curtis could only watch in awe as she cut down the guards with ease. One of Nara's robots approached Curtis and, with a single swift motion, tore the chains from his wrists. Curtis stumbled as the weight lifted, his legs trembling. Nara caught him before he fell, her grip steady. "Stay close to me," she said. "We don't have much time." Curtis nodded. 2 days to argue. The two of them moved quickly through the chaos, Nara leading the way as her robots provided cover. Explosions rocked the facility, and the screams of guards and prisoners alike echoed through the corridors. The colony was coming apart at the seams, but the technophage weren't about to give up so easily. As they approached the hangar, the colony's ultimate defense system activated. A massive war machine, the Technobane, emerged from the shadows, its towering frame bristling with weapons. It fired a barrage of energy blasts that forced Nara and her team to take cover. The robot's glowing red eyes scanned the battlefield, locking onto Nara. "Stay back!" Nara shouted to Curtis. "I'll handle this." Curtis watched helplessly as Nara faced the Technobane alone. The machine was a monstrous creation, designed to annihilate anything in its path. Its energy cannons fired relentlessly, but Nara was faster. She dodged and weaved through the onslaught, her energy blades slicing through its armor with surgical precision. The battle was fierce, and for a moment, Curtis feared Nara might not make it. But with one final, powerful strike, she drove her blade into the Technobane's core. The machine let out a deafening roar as it collapsed, its systems overloaded. Nara turned to Curtis, her breathing heavy but her expression triumphant. "Let's go," she said. They reached the hangar, where a sleek starship awaited. The remaining robots held off the guards as Nara and Curtis boarded the vessel. The engines roared to life, and within moments, they were soaring through the void of space, leaving the crumbling colony behind. Curtis slumped into a seat, his body finally relaxing as the adrenaline wore off. He looked at Nara, who was at the controls, her expression calm and focused. "Why did you do this?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Why risk everything for me?" Nara turned to him, her eyes softening. "Because people like you don't deserve to rot in a place like that. And because I owed you." Curtis frowned, trying to recall what she meant. But Nara didn't elaborate. The ship entered hyperspace, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Curtis felt a sense of peace. He was free. But as he looked at Nara, he realized there was so much he didn't know about her or himself. Curtis stared at his hands, still raw and trembling from the weight of the chains. The silence inside the ship was almost jarring after the chaos of the escape. The hum of the engines was steady, comforting even, but his mind refused to settle. Memories of the colony, its suffocating walls, the relentless guards, the faces of other prisoners who weren't lucky enough to escape, flashed before his eyes. Nara glanced at him from the pilot's seat. "We'll be out of range soon. Technophage ships aren't built for high-speed pursuits like this." Curtis leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I still don't understand. How did you know I was there? Why come now?" Nara hesitated for a moment, her fingers brushing across the console, as if she was searching for the right words. "I've been tracking the Nostra colony for months. The consortium has been expanding their operations, abducting more people, enslaving entire populations. When I heard they'd brought in a Terran," she paused, turning her head to meet his gaze. "I knew it had to be you." Curtis's brow furrowed. "But why me? We knew each other years ago. Nara, we weren't—" He trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. Nara let out a soft laugh, though there was no humor in it. "You think I'd risk my life, assemble a crew, and infiltrate one of the galaxy's most secure prisons for just anyone?" Curtis blinked. "I don't know what to think anymore." Nara leaned back in her seat, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "You don't remember, do you?" "Remember what?" Curtis asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Nara tilted her head, studying him. "The crash. The day we met." Curtis frowned, his mind grasping at fragments of a memory buried deep. He could see flashes, fire, wreckage, and a younger version of Nara standing over him. She had saved him, hadn't she? He hadn't known who she was at the time. Just some strange, otherworldly figure pulling him from the brink of death. You saved me," he said, the realization dawning on him. "On that deserted moon." Nara nodded. "You saved me first. My ship was downed by a rival faction, and they were closing in. You were just a scavenger back then. But you didn't hesitate to fight for me. You could have walked away, but you didn't. You got me to safety, even when it nearly cost you your life." Curtis ran a hand through his hair. "That was years ago. I didn't think you'd even remember." Nara's expression softened. "I don't forget the people who saved me, Curtis, and I don't abandon them when they're in trouble." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The ship's interior was bathed in soft blue light, the stars outside streaking past in long, shimmering lines. "So, what now?" Curtis finally asked. "You freed me. But where do I go from here? The technophage isn't going to forget about me. They'll come looking." Nara's expression hardened. "They won't find you. Not where I'm taking you. And where is that?" Nara turned back to the console, her fingers flying over the controls. A holographic map appeared, displaying a remote star system far from the reach of the consortium. "A sanctuary," she said. "One of the last places in the galaxy where their influence doesn't reach. You'll be safe there." Curtis studied the map, his mind spinning with questions. "And what about you? What happens to you after this?" Nara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood and walked over to him, her movements graceful yet deliberate. She knelt before him, her glowing eyes meeting his. "I have more people to save," she said quietly. "There are others like you, Curtis, people who need someone to fight for them. This galaxy is a cruel place, but I won't stop trying to make it better." Curtis felt a lump in his throat. "You can't do it alone, Nara. What you're doing, it's dangerous." "I've made my choice," she said firmly. "Just like you made yours all those years ago." Curtis reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Then let me help you." "I owe you that much." Nara shook her head, a small, sad smile on her lips. "You don't owe me anything, Curtis. What you owe is to yourself. Take this second chance and live the life you deserve. That's all I ask." He opened his mouth to argue, but stopped when she rose to her feet, her demeanor shifting back to the confident, commanding presence she had been during the rescue. "Get some rest," she said. "You'll need your strength when we arrive." Curtis watched her walk back to the pilot's seat, a mix of gratitude and frustration churning within him. He wanted to fight beside her, to repay the debt he felt he owed. But deep down he knew she was right. Yet as he sat there, his thoughts wouldn't rest. The quiet of the ship, so stark compared to the chaos he had just escaped, seemed to amplify the storm of emotions inside him. He rose from his seat and made his way toward the cockpit. The soft hum of the ship's systems filled the air as Nara worked at the controls, her focus unwavering. She didn't turn as he approached, though it was clear she knew he was there. "Couldn't rest?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with understanding. Curtis leaned against the doorway, his arms crossed. "Not really. Too much on my mind." Nara finally glanced at him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "It's normal. You've been through more than most could handle. Your body's free, but your mind hasn't caught up yet." He nodded, his jaw tightening. "It's not just that. It's everything. The others I left behind in that place. The ones who didn't make it. And now you're just going to drop me off and go back into the fire?" Nara turned her chair to face him fully. "Curtis, you can't save everyone. Sometimes survival is the only victory you can claim. And as for me, I've chosen this path. I know the risks, but you can't do it alone," he insisted, his voice rising. "I've seen what the consortium is capable of. They'll stop at nothing to crush anyone who stands in their way. You need someone to watch your back." She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood, stepping closer to him. "I've been alone for a long time, Curtis, longer than you can imagine. I've learned how to survive, how to fight. It's not that I don't appreciate the offer, but this isn't your fight." Curtis met her gaze unflinching. "It is now. They took everything from me, Nara. My freedom, my life, my dignity. If I just walk away, what was all of that for? What's the point of surviving if I don't do something with it?" For a moment, neither of them spoke. The ship's hum was the only sound between them. Finally, Nara sighed, a flicker of something, respect, maybe, crossing her face. "You're stubborn," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I remember that about you. You're not exactly easy to convince yourself." He shot back, a small grin breaking through his seriousness. She laughed softly, the sound lighter than he expected. "All right, Curtis. If you're so determined to throw yourself into danger, who am I to stop you? But don't think for a second that this will be easy." Curtis straightened, his expression resolute. "I'm not looking for easy. I'm looking for purpose." Nara nodded, a new weight settling in her gaze. "Then we'll start by getting you back on your feet. Training, equipment, intel. You're no good to anyone if you don't know how to handle yourself out there." "I'm ready," he said, without hesitation. "We'll see about that," she replied, turning back to the controls. "For now, we focus on getting to the sanctuary. It'll give us time to prepare for what's ahead." Curtis sat down in the co-pilot's chair, his mind clearer than it had been in years. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving, he was planning, hoping, fighting for something bigger than himself. Nara glanced at him out of the corner of her eye. "One last thing, Curtis. Yeah, if you're going to fight beside me, you follow my lead. Out there, hesitation gets you killed. Can you do that?" He met her gaze, his voice steady. "I can." Nara's lips curved into a faint smile, and for the first time since the chaos of the escape, Curtis felt something unfamiliar but welcome, belonging. As the ship sailed through hyperspace, the streaking stars outside seemed to stretch endlessly ahead. Both of them knew the road would be long and fraught with danger, but for the first time in a long time, Curtis wasn't afraid of what lay ahead. Together, they were stepping into the unknown, not as strangers, but as allies. The galaxy was vast, cruel, and filled with darkness. But now, Curtis wasn't just a victim of it. With Nara at his side, he was ready to push back.